Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining the Redlands Camera Club this evening. We have Eric Kaltner as our guest speaker today. And Eric is from Chula Vista, but currently living in Orange. And Eric, as a kid, used to go to the air shows with his father. And his father was a World War II history buff who loved World War II aircraft. And this instilled in Eric a love for airplanes, both inside and outside of the airplane. And aviation photography is what Eric loves to do, according to Eric. Okay, so Eric, thank you for being here tonight and helping us all be better photographers. And I am going to turn the screen over to you. Would you like me to switch for you, or do you want to do it?
You can do it.
Okay, come on up. Thank you, Eric.
How you guys doing tonight?
Excellent.
Right. I kind of, saw a lot of bunch of your photos up here, and I was just like oohing and awing myself. Wonderful photographers in your own right. Everything that you guys do, I can see the passion in what you guys do. So I have my own passion, which is aviation photography here, and so this I wanted you guys to tell your story of your day at the air show through your lens. So when you guys are out there photographing at the air show, there's going to be all sorts of different, compositions and things that you're going to be able to see, and people are going to be around, and depending on, what kind of a photographer you are, you're going to want that image or you're not going to want that image. So we're going to get into it and get the next slide. Okay, so
That's beautiful.
when and where to point my camera. When aiming my camera, how do I know when it's the best time to do so? And then where I want to aim my camera isn't ideal. However, it's not a shot. It's a shot everyone has. And if the sun is in front of me, what are my choices when and where to shoot? And can shooting towards the sun and not into the sun give me some good images? So when you're aiming your camera and you want to know when the best time to do so is, you kind of just have to watch how everything transforms in front of you. The sun is a moving object in the sky where it's not ideal to shoot into the direction or around the edges of where the sunlight's coming from, because you're going to get nothing back in the images. Okay. Where I want to aim my camera isn't ideal. However, it's a shot everyone has. Now, there are some photographers out there that I know that take shots, into the sun and a bunch of other stuff, and they get some really, really, really good shots. And you kind of have to know your settings in order to get those kind of shots. So I kind of want to get into that a little bit too, as far as like, when you're shooting, it goes with anything too, nature, anything you're shooting. Lighting is key in everything that you do when you're photographing. Okay. Indoor, outdoor, whatever artificial light that you guys have, anything like that. And he did a wonderful job. Or whoever took the photo of the Joshua tree, of using the car lights as, that's, I've seen light painting before, and, these guys walk around with huge light wands, and then they serious, and it's great photography if you know how to do long exposure. It really, truly is. So, if the sun is in front of me, what are my choices and where to shoot? For me, I like to generally shoot when the aircraft are coming from the left or the right, and there's gonna, like I said, there's gonna be, where the sun is at. So depending on, if the sun is here at like 10 a.m. or 11 a.m., my chances of getting a pretty good shot with beautiful lighting are gonna be to my right, a little bit further down, and maybe a little bit further to the left. So as the sun transgresses its way across the sky, you're gonna be able to determine where to point your camera and what shots you're gonna want. Yes, shooting into the sun can give you some good images, but the chances of that happening are really slim if you don't really know your settings all that well. And it looks like a lot of you guys do know your settings, so you guys really know how to handle the camera. So this was always a challenge for me. Is it propeller, rotary wing, jet powered, or is it both? Now, the reason why, or is it both, is on there is because a lot of the new military aircraft, especially like this Viper here in the middle, they're using jet engines. They also have, they have the propellers and all that stuff, but the propellers are basically what gives them the lift and all that good stuff, right? So, on the Ospreys, attack helicopters, Marine Corps helicopters, and even some of like the law enforcement helicopters now, like the Airbuses and all that stuff, they're all using jet engines to power them, and then they just use the rotors to get the lift. So that's really kind of, here and there, but when you're photographing propeller aircraft like Vicky Benzing here in her 1940 Boeing Stearman, you gotta be down at a slow shutter speed in order to be able to get that image. And you also have to do a lot of what they call panning, if you guys never heard that term. And then sometimes I've heard people just, follow the subject or whatever. Panning, yeah, I believe is the correct term. So I'm down to probably about maybe 125 here, 1/125th. Really nothing any lower than that. I'm not too steady when it gets too low. Helicopters are the biggest challenge, but when you're dealing with these guys, and they're a little bit quicker than helicopters moving sometimes. So you're panning and you're trying to get that shot. You basically want to be on a lower shutter speed, be able to get that propeller lift. And so you want to show motion, when you're photographing an aerial subject, because there's, like you can see here, there's a lot of blue sky, right? There's really nothing in the background that gives you any kind of depth or anything like that. And there's really nothing that's going to show in the background as far as like motion being given here, as far as like the vehicles in the sky, these aircraft. So you can see the smoke is blurred, the propeller is blurred, and that's because of the low shutter speed, and you're just panning that aircraft to try to get that shot. And the same thing with the helicopters here. Now I'm down to about 1/80th on a helicopter with the rotary blades. They're big, they're slower moving than a propeller driven aircraft. They generate lift. These things are, I don't know how many feet they are as far as lengthwise go per blade, but the bigger the blade, especially on the Ospreys, Brian here, he's done photography of aerial assets. The Osprey, is that a challenging platform for you to photograph?
I haven't photographed one.
You haven't photographed one?
Not yet.
Okay.
I've done a lot of the fighter helicopters and airplanes,
Okay.
and that just by the helicopter alone, from ground to air, it broke one of my lenses. And I was probably about 12 feet away.
Wow.
And the amount of force that they give off when they're turning, speed, the lift, everything, you have to be careful.
Yeah. When something has a big blade like that, you kind of want to be, I like to be at 1/80th, maybe 1/25th, depending on how steady and how I'm feeling that day. But you just, anything that has propellers on it and rotary blades, you always want to kind of show motion with your image. Here's a great example of a fighter jet with motion here. Now this is what we call the triple cone. This is it's going transonic. It's not going supersonic, but you can see the vapor across the cockpit of the F-35C here, and then you got some back here, and then you got the major cone back here. That is showing the motion of the aircraft as well, coming through the sky. But when you're photographing jets, you're going to want to be at something closer to maybe 1/750th to 1/1500th. You don't want anything any longer than that or any shorter than that, because you want to keep that the depth of the aircraft. You want to be able to get as much detail as you can in that. Next slide. So shutter speed while photographing propeller and rotary moving aircraft, we just covered that right now. So as you can see here, a Venom, another Viper, an Osprey. You see how big the blades are. Those things are massive. They're huge, and when they move, they're way slower than anything else. So you can see these are turboprops on the C-130.
That's great.
So these right here are moving at a faster pace than anything else, at a higher RPM. They're trying to generate lift to get that big airplane up into the sky, while you have these huge rotary wings on these helicopters that are big enough to generate the amount of lift, but they're not moving as fast as propeller-driven aircraft. These are all challenging, especially that one was the most challenging, because the thing's coming head on at you, and you're kind of panning like this, so it's a little challenging, especially when you're panning like that. So what should my settings be for US Navy Legacy or United States Air Force Heritage flights? Now, you're gonna see probably one or two of these at the air show if you guys go on a field trip this coming weekend. This is, the Planes of Fame P-51 WWII and the Planes of Fame F-8F, Bearcat. And then you got the A-10 from the US Air Force demo, and then you got the F-18 from the Navy's Legacy flights, right? So this is also another challenging thing to photograph here, due to the fact that you have a fast-moving jet fighter, or not so fast as the A-10 is not as fast, but it's fast. And then you have the propeller-driven aircraft that are being flown to show you the heritage and the legacy of the two branches of military that flew these aircraft during World War II, through Korea, through Vietnam, and up to now. Right? So when you're photographing these, you need to be down on a lower shutter speed, kind of like you were just regularly photographing a helicopter or a propeller-driven aircraft. And you're gonna need to be really steady with the panning, especially when you're trying to capture the jet in there. Because I do have a lot of images where I'm trying to pan this guy, because he's the priority when you're photographing these flights, right? The propeller aircraft to me is always a priority for the simple fact that you're always trying to make sure that you're keeping up with his speed, and you're keeping your focus reticles in the same area on that airplane as when he's moving. So in hopes that you get the clarity of the fighter jet in the background. Both these shots were taken at Reno. You can see the racing number on WWII here, and then Steve Hinton, I believe, flying the Bearcat. But you can totally see you're going to get a little bit of blur. You're not going to get 100% crispness unless you're some of these guys that I know that are just like top notch. I mean, I've seen some really good detailed photos of panning, but very challenging at the same time. So those guys get props. But you can get some really good images like this if you go to the air show. Question? No. Okay. All right. Slide. Photographing fast movers. Now, you can see here, I was probably down to about maybe 1/750th, about trying to get that, the clouds and all that stuff going under the F-35C here and coming through the, and he's also producing his own vapor. So this was a very cloudy day at the Huntington Beach Air Show.
So you're talking about shutter speeds. What about aperture? What are you?
My aperture is going to be about f8 if you're using Canon. I don't know so much about Nikon. I don't know what Nikon's aperture.
They have an F8 too.
Oh, they do? Okay. I've never shot Nikon. I've heard it was a little different, but I'm not sure. I never really investigated or looked into it. But yeah, I'm usually about f8. And then when you're also doing that, so you got to keep in mind when you're going up on your aperture to a higher number, the darker the image is going to be, right, for the depth of field. And then the lower you go, the lighter it's going to be because you're letting more light into your lens. So when you're photographing aircraft, I usually try to maintain about f8, f9s due to brightness. Like at Reno, I was at f8, and then I was bouncing back and forth between f8 to like f11, back and forth between those because of the lighting and all that stuff. And it was very bright, harsh lighting. So you're getting a lot of glare, a lot of heat coming off the runways and all that good stuff. So I was kind of just going back and forth. Sometimes depending, you can go a little bit lighter, because shadows and stuff like that from the light that you're not getting.
So where's your choice of capturing the plane relative to the ground?
It kind of, if you go to enough air shows, you kind of get an understanding of where you want to be and for what kind of shots you're looking for. We usually try to set up like if we go to the Huntington Beach Air Show, we'll try to set up closer to the pier one day, and then we'll be at Show Center the next, and then we'll go to the free area on the Sunday, and you'll get that different lighting and all that good stuff down at that side, as opposed to being further towards the pier and all that. But yeah, I mean, it just all depends, what you're looking for that day. You could, sometimes, knowing where the aircraft are going to be as they cross Show Center, you're gonna get certain images as opposed to like if you're over by the pier when they come around and they do the sneak passes, you know, that's where you're gonna get a lot of those more dramatic, like, you know, high baking, high vapor shots of aircraft around the corner. Yeah, did you have a question about?
I had the same question. I just think it's a phenomenal perspective. I was wondering if you were situated too.
Yeah, on this one right here, was more towards show center to the right just a little bit. So you know, as he was coming through the clouds, he was generating that vapor and just coming out, and it was like it was a very cool dramatic shot because of him. Like you're not seeing the whole airplane, you're seeing him just come through a cloud, and you know you get that shot right there, and that's just
First off, that's damn nice.
Yeah.
No question.
thank you.
Well,
You usually
I
get,
think
or try to get press passes so you can get inside the deadline at air shows?
I do. I applied for the March one. It's a little too late. I didn't get it. So you know, maybe next time. I have gone. I've been invited out to areas, to air bases and stuff like that to go photograph assets. That's it's nice when you can do that and get a little bit more up close with them. However, you know, sometimes you know it's just you know it's not necessarily about the access. It's about where you set yourself up for at an air show. You know, a lot of almost 95% of my images that I get are from air shows and or spotting when I go out. Like I travel from Orange, I go all the way to Yuma, I go to Point Magoo, I come out to March, I go to Miramar, I go to all these other bases and stuff like that to try to, you know, get stuff in. And when you're photographing, even when you're spotting out somewhere, you know, you'll see like a bunch of guys huddled in the corner over here trying to get that shot, you know, but you know, you got to think outside the box sometimes too. You know, if you really want a certain image, you got to kind of just, you know, maybe push the buttons a little bit and kind of, you know, get yourself into a position and, you know, get your shot and get out. You know what I mean?
Just don't get arrested.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I'm not breaking or defying any laws. It's just that, you know, a lot of times when you're around a base, security doesn't want you in certain areas. So like due to safety reasons, yeah, so you know you want to get in, get your shot and get out. You know, that way they don't, you know, they're not gonna bother you.
What is your standard focal length range that you would say you comfortably use?
I'm all over the place, man. I'm all over the place. I have a Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter lens. So like depending on you know, what it is, I'm backing out to 150 and I'm all the way to full 600. You know, it depends, and I'm constantly with the lens just trying to, you know, get it in focus and get that. Yes.
I'm gonna try again.
Okay.
So it's not where you are on the field that interests me. It's the choice of takeoff and landing. And at what point relative to your height? So are you up on something to take this picture? So you're down on the ground.
I'm on the ground.
I'm a little person. So to get this picture, I'm gonna have a hard time.
No, not necessarily.
Well, not at all. Probably. But anyway, the point is, when there's a point at which you can take the picture taking off and the same thing in landing, how are you judging which is going to be, not the banking ones, but the one where they're coming down or taking off?
For that, you kind of, you just gotta sometimes take your guesses and your chances with that. You know, sometimes aircraft, depending on what size they are and what they're doing, they're gonna land on, you know, at the threshold, which is on the runway. So if you're looking at a runway from a top view picture, you're gonna see a bunch of white lines, and then they're gonna like fade from like 10 to like maybe 8 to 6 to 4 to 2, right? As they go down the runway. So that's you know, however many feet from the threshold you're going. So like, depends on the aircraft and how big they are, where they need to land in order to stop by the end of the runway. I've seen B-52 bombers come into March Air Force Base, and they land pretty much about 1,000 feet down the runway. And then once they hit, they put their drag chute out because they're so big that they'll run off the end of the runway if they don't have that chute to help slow them down as they're on their brakes, right? So, I mean, it all depends on the aircraft that you're looking at as you're photographing them. So, I mean, it's not really it is not really where you're at, but kind of just knowing the aircraft too. So.
Since we have no clue. I only did civilian aircraft, so here we are at all these military ones. I think my question for the March Air Force Base is, I remember from years past, me and 15 million other people are out there. To try, if there's somebody that pays the VIP pass can get the chair up a little bit closer. And the rest of us are back here in the 15 million people. So to get these pictures, that's where we're at. What are we going to be able to accomplish?
Well, so just one second here, Russ. I can remember your name from the beautiful pictures you took, that cowboy one, awesome photo. So with your question there, you know, all my photos that I get from air shows are either from the grandstands or they're from, like, you know, there's been times where I'm at Miramar or March Air Force Base and I'm all the way at the very far end where nobody else is at.
Got it.
You know, like, and I've sat in those VIP seats, and to watch the air show from there is very, very hard on your neck.
And your
Because you're more like this than you are like this,
Yeah.
kind of watching, you know, wherever, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, when you're all around a camera, you know, that's weight on your shoulders, weight on your neck. I mean, no matter how big of a lens you have, it's still weight, right? So, you know, when you're sitting in those seats, you're kind of just like looking up and whatever, but, it's not so much, like, you know, where you're sitting at on the airfield. It's just kind of having an eye for what you want as far as the photograph goes.
Okay.
You know, just a couple of suggestions. David made this comment on one of his pictures that he had taken. It was a 2-day event on the surfing that we went to. And I would say with March Air Force Base, it's the same thing. If you want to figure out where the best place to stand is or what you're looking for, you go out there on Saturday and you get a feeling for the flow of where the planes are going. It's a pretty standard program that they have with everything lined up. And you can see how they sit there and they perform and how they do. And then you can go out there on Sunday and, okay, now I know where these planes were taking off and landing from, and I know where these were. And now I know where maybe I want to get one or two of my shots.
Yes.
And, you know, I think it's quite amazing when you see the Thunderbirds and you see them do their cross patterns. And it's just amazing that how fast they're going and yet how they do these acrobatics out there that you just go, oh my gosh, you know,
Yeah.
and how they can cross right in the middle of where the stands are.
Do you use burst mode?
I do sometimes, but I'm a different photographer than everybody else. I mean, I know there's a term out there called spray and pray. People like to set their shutter speed up to about maybe 2,000 and a little higher, and then they'll just kind of like spray, or they'll even go down at a lower level, at a lower shutter speed, and just spray and just hope that they get something. You know, and you know, the keeper rate at that point is like very slim to none. So, next slide. All right, getting creative with your images and post-processing. Oh, you have one question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you mentioned that you have 100 to 600.
150 to 600.
Okay, so is it 7,200 gonna be okay?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 7,200 is actually a prime lens that you can use for especially for airship photography. Now with March Air Force Base, one thing I've noticed about their air show as opposed to the last time I went, they fly very high. They're not down any lower than they actually, you know, can be, I think, in my mind, you know, and then a lot of other photographers think, you know, I mean, I know they have safety regulations and stuff in place. But the Air Force is a special breed when it comes to putting on an air show. Like they do things a lot differently than the Navy and the Marine Corps. If you go to a Navy and Marine Corps air show like Miramar, you're going to notice that the aircraft are going to be flying a little bit more on the edge, and not just that, but they're going to be flying a little bit more closer to the crowd and things like that. The Air Force is kind of like, you know, a little bit standoffish as far as from what I've seen, and you know, being around some of these bases and watching them, you know, do their routine training. They're just a certain way that they do things, and you know, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that, you know, how they go about doing their thing is pretty much.
My second question to this one, so Would you recommend, say, a 5D Mark IV versus an R5? Because the new mirrorless are a little bit, they lag with speed?
You know, I don't use mirrorless. I have a good friend who does. He has figured it out and he's pretty good at it. I want to go mirrorless, because the quality of the image is way better than what you have with the mirror, but at the same time, like, everybody in here, I mean, how many, raise your hand if you have a mirrorless camera.
Everybody has an iPhone. It's
Right,
mirrorless.
Where's the date?
Right, so for me, you know, I right now I can't afford a mirrorless, but I go with my 7D Mark II. And it's a very good, reliable camera. You know, you don't necessarily, you know, this is coming from somebody who owns just a regular DSLR, and you guys all own mirrorless, but you know, it really doesn't matter what you use as far as a camera. You know, it's just, you kind of have to know what you're looking for and know what you're going to be shooting. That goes with, like I said, anything, landscape, nature photography, static photography, like some of these wonderful images, like he had the hot sauce one, which is that was a cool photo. You know, so it just all depends.
Okay,
Yeah, it's all in the eye of the photographer. It's not the equipment.
well, because I've shot NHRA racing,
Mhm.
and I have noticed that with the older system, like 5D Mark IV, the 3, the 2, I get better shots than with the R5. And I noticed there's a speed difference when it comes to.
Oh, yes, maybe there is. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've never dealt with the mirror.
The 3.
Yeah, that is a very good
So
one.
if you
Yeah.
have like one of the things like
Oh.
on, these type of photos, if you have, depending on your, if you have a C fast, get the fastest write speed, XQD are extremely fast. Don't use CF cards or SDs, they're too slow.
Maybe that's the issue I'm having on my R5 then, when it comes to the racing.
Because you're getting faster write speed.
Okay, so it's the SD card, huh? Yeah, good to know.
So this is gonna talk about how you can get creative. Now, this was
We got a question for
yeah.
Carl. Yeah, well, it's not a question, a comment that the issues of, basically mirrorless, you have the option of doing electronic shutter versus mechanical shutter. I know for bird photography, I don't use electronic because I get weird distortions of things that are moving. And I assume that's gonna probably be an issue if, you know, for some of the mirrorless, if they're shooting electronic, you know, I don't know what it'll do to a propeller, but you get weird artifacts of hummingbirds, you know, wings are all distorted. If you shoot electronic, and so it's always, even though you get more frames per second, you know, you do the better, you know, frame in bursts. Shooting with electronic, but to minimize probably potential distortions of moving objects, it's best to probably shoot that in the old-fashioned way of mechanical shutter.
You know, now that you say that, I believe that was one of the issues that my friend had with his mirrorless camera. He was finding that, you know, he was using the electronic shutter on a lot of the aircraft that he was photographing, and it just wasn't working out that way. And it was distorting a lot of images. So I think he went to the manual or the non-electronic, and he used that instead. And he, you know, was working through it. But I think he's actually mastered the whole. He's a geeky guy. Very geeky guy. So when it comes to his cameras, he's very geeky about it. He's a pretty good aviation photographer. So if you guys at the end, you know, you ask me about him, I'll let you know. I'll show you his page on Instagram. Beautiful photos. Guys, is spectacular. So when you're photographing your images at the air show, when you're coming home and when you're excited, you want to dig into your selection that you've taken. I use Lightroom, mobile Lightroom on my phone. I do use it on the computer, but it takes your black photos and turns them into wow, right? So at the past this here, I'm going to show you some other images that I've edited through Lightroom, and I've taken them from what they were to what they are now. So you can go ahead and so. This mosquito shot here was taken at Salinas for the Central Coast Air Fest. And my buddy here got a big old white bucket hat on, you know, kind of got in the way a little bit. So I took the image and I cropped it down just a bit and I cut it out and I edited it to the black and white because I thought black and white was a little bit more fitting. It was a little bit more elegant in the image for portraying a World War II fighter aircraft. And the lighting too wasn't very good at that air show, because it was just all in your face, pretty much. So, and then you get the next slideshow. So this one here was taken at Apple Valley, and, I was watching this guy go back and forth on the tug, and, I saw this image and I was just like, man, that's gonna be a good shot. And so I clicked, I was just clicking and clicking and clicking, and I got to this one right here, and I thought that one was really good. So you can see the sunlight coming up, sun rising and all this good stuff, and then I kind of, just edited to what you see here, gives it a beautiful warm, glow in October, and just, gives you that storytelling right there. The guy, he's driving the tug out to the aircraft, maybe getting ready to pull that airplane out to go flying, or, do something with it, but it kind of tells a little bit of a story there.
Love how that sun is coming right through.
Yeah.
So are you using, like denoise in Lightroom?
Yeah, I am. I'm using some of that stuff. I'm also using just, regular, presets and things like that I've also created.
Oh, okay.
Can you set presets on the mobile Lightroom app?
Yeah, there's actually, they already have some already installed for you,
Okay.
like if you have Lightroom mobile and you went through the updates and stuff, it's probably already in there.
Okay.
Yeah, but just check it out.
Awesome.
What ISO do you use?
I try to shoot, lower ISO if I can. This was, early sunrise, so I was actually overexposing this image just a little bit, and then to draw in the darker shadowy areas. This ISO probably maybe 1600 to 1300 in that range.
Can I ask you a question right now that she asked about ISO? Do you prefer to use a higher ISO versus a lower shutter?
No, if you use a higher ISO and a lower shutter, you're just gonna get a white screen. So.
No, I mean either one or the other to get more
Oh,
light in.
I see. Okay, I try to combine my settings to where I'm not gonna get as much noise in the image. Now, some of these images are blown up, you're gonna see a little bit of noise because they're so blown up. But I usually try to shoot at a relatively low ISO, maybe like 400 to 800. And then, my shutter speed, is gonna be relatively, for propeller aircraft and helicopters and stuff, it's gonna be down to about 125, 180, it's all the way up to like 1500 for jets. And then I basically use my aperture to kind of mitigate the lighting coming through. So like if I have, an ISO of 800 and I have a shutter speed of 750 to 1000, I'm probably going to be somewhere maybe a little higher on the aperture, maybe f9, f11.
Okay.
So. So here's the venerable F-22 Raptor. This was a day that it was a very horrible day at the air show. It was, so you gotta kind of like make lemonade out of
Make some great lemonade, man.
So, I actually was frustrated with the weather this day, and it was so bad that they had stopped the air show probably for about 45 minutes to an hour, maybe a little longer, because the weather was just so bad, and you could hear the jets flying over, and you can hear them communicating with the Los Alamitos Tower, like, hey, there's really nothing to clear up right now, or whatever. And so the F-22 Raptor came through, made a couple passes, some noise. F-35 did the same thing, and they went back, and then they waited for the weather to clear a little bit, and it was past 5 p.m. So usually they were like, and they gave like a like a special waiver for them. Okay, just go ahead and finish it off, right? So I waited, I was gonna leave, I was walking out, and I was just like ready to go, and then I heard they were coming back, so I stopped, and not from the position that I was actually originally in, but I knew where the F-22 was gonna be when he came back over the crowd, and he was gonna pull up and get into the vertical. So I knew I was gonna get some good vapor on this guy. So I got that there with the afterburner, and this is just another example of taking your image from this to that with Lightroom. There's other Photoshop and a bunch of other post-processing that you can use. I just prefer Lightroom. I want to learn Photoshop. Photoshop for me is kind of a beast though. It's very intimidating. When it comes to it, but I don't know how many you guys use Lightroom, Photoshop?
I use
Both. Yeah, I still can't figure out the Photoshop thing, but
All the stuff that Lightroom does, you can do in Photoshop. In the camera raw mode.
There's
So,
12 different ways to do it, each one.
yeah, but Photoshop has hundreds of ways to do the same thing.
Yeah.
next one. So this is the blues, this is Chewy, this is Commander Kerry Rickoff. Lieutenant Commander Kerry Rickoff, and he's now retired now. He had a spinny flight not too long ago. But this is him at Miramar. So this isn't from the crowd at all. This is not, I wasn't where the normal crowd is. I photographed so many Blue Angels air shows, and I feel I get better images when I go out to El Centro. So if you take that 2.5 to 3 hour drive out to El Centro, and you go out there and just watch them do a practice for a weekend or a day, you're gonna find you're gonna get a lot better images. Plus, you're gonna get a lot of better lighting and all this good stuff. So this was a very cloudy day at Miramar, and I was on my way back to my car, and I just kind of stood at my car and just watched him come back over, and they did some passes with the diamond, and then Chewy comes ripping around, with the vapor coming off here on the Lex. So I was like, that's gonna be a pretty good shot. So I took that shot right there and snapped it, and pretty happy with what I got.
Have you ever had an opportunity to sit in one of the fighter jets or be flown in any of the fighter jets?
No.
Okay.
I would love to go for a ride in a fighter jet,
Yeah.
but I know
Your stomach.
I'm a pretty big guy. I see somebody pass out in the back of the fighter jet.
It might be an awesome experience, not many people can say that, right?
I had a friend of mine who's he was out at Fort Irwin, and he actually offered for me to sit in the cockpit of H-60 Black Hawk helicopter. And you literally have to know how to do yoga in order to do it.
Okay.
I'm just over there trying to get my foot around with the leg, and the stick and the cyclic, and man, he showed me how to get in, and I was like trying to replicate that, and I just looked like a freaking like a newborn giraffe, man, just stumbling everywhere.
Awesome.
Trying not to hit any switches.
Yeah, I hear you.
So this is another from the Huntington Beach Air Show. That I waited. I was leaving and I waited.
That seems to be the pattern.
And it just the lighting was just it. After a certain point, the lighting became beautiful. So when he was talking about his cowboy image he got in Colorado, and how he flipped it from left to right, or however he did it, and this right here just brings back that right there, because sometimes patience is something that's going to work out for you eventually, if you have the patience to do it. When you're sitting there in a cloud rainy storm, it literally rained on us and all this good stuff, so you're sitting there and you're just like waiting, and then all of a sudden like you hear they're coming back, and you're like, all right, you see the way the sun is, the clouds, and you're like, this is going to be the pure gold. So, with the sunlight coming through, you got the shadowy on the F-35, got the vapor coming off, the afterburner kicked on. Bayo here was just, she was just ripping it up. She was popping flares and everything out near the end of that show.
I'm curious, like when you take your shots, are they cropped closer to the plane, or are these kind of close to your?
I do a lot of cropping.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have to set speed.
What's that?
You have to with them moving that fast.
Yeah. When they're moving, I'm serious. Like when you're dealing with fast moving jets, like I'm panning the aircraft, and they're so fast that like I'm up, down, here, and you're like you get maybe like 4 of them that are actually near the center of what you're trying to photograph, because they're moving so fast. And so that brain eye connection is just kind of like, all right.
Okay, so you're definitely shooting wider.
Yeah, I'm definitely shooting wider to make sure I get the
Okay.
shot, rather than being zoomed in all the way and getting
Okay.
that shot.
Okay.
And then this was, I was at Camarillo for an air show there at Camarillo Airport, where the CAF has an air show. They put their little warbirds out there on display and they fly them around. And, so I was like at the end of the show, I saw the way the weather was, and I went, took the 15-minute drive down to Point Magoo from that point, you know, and I was like, oh, just see if anything comes in. And this guy came from the East Coast, I think it was Oceania. It's a C-130, Lockheed Martin C-130 Hercules. This is one of the older models. It's retrofitted with the new turboprop blades, which actually gives you a little bit better image when you're photographing propeller-driven aircraft, because you know the older versions were 4-blade, and so you know you had to be down a lower shutter speed in order to get more blur. But these guys are moving so fast that they're generating more lift and more air to keep that airplane in the air at slower speeds. So I edited this a certain way just to kind of get that sun setting in the back, and then I even highlighted the exhaust coming out of the back end of the aircraft here, because that's something when you're there's certain aircraft that you're going to see, like the B-52s, C-130s, even some of the bigger, bulkier Marine Corps helicopters like the CH-53, not the Kilo now, the new one's not going to have it, but you're going to see that black smoke just coming out the back, and that's indicative of those older aircraft, and it just shows, it also gives you movement as well. So it shows, you know, that there's movement going on there with the black exhaust just coming out of the back. Happy Earth Day.
Very nice.
Oh,
World War II, it's a warbird here. This is just another example of panning the aircraft. Now, if you're going to look for images like this, you don't have to necessarily be at a lower shutter speed, for the simple fact that you're getting the propeller in that position right there. So you could actually probably be a little higher of a shutter speed in order to get, you know, that image and have the crispness of it. You know, you can see the details in the aircraft, the paneling, you know, and all that good stuff. But here, if you, I just happen to be panning about that shot, you know, right at that moment in time. Now probably got 180 on that one.
I love the fact how, but it looks like Aston Martin makes the engine for that, or it looks like the Aston Martin symbol on the side.
No, that's the commemorative Air Force logo that they put on, they slap on all their aircraft. Now, it's not very pretty to look at, but I'll tell you, you know,
it reminds me of the
you own the
Aston
aircraft,
Martin
you can
logo.
put whatever you want on there. But yeah, this right here, it's a rare aircraft because it's one of 3 Japanese Zeros that I know that are actually flying in the world today. This one here is owned by CAF of the Camarillo, the CAF SoCal. This one here was acquired from Russia, I believe, and it's an actual A6M3 Zero, and this one actually has an American radial engine in it to power it to get it in the air. There's only one that I know of in the world, and I've heard of. That's the only one in the world, and that's at Plains of Fame in Chino. So if you guys are relatively close to there, what's that?
The Mitsubishi?
Yes, the Mitsubishi A6M5. This one has the original Nakajima Sakai engine in it.
It is the only one flying with an original.
Yeah, it's the only one flying with an original engine in it. So if you ever, you know, usually in December they have a living history, but every first weekend of the month they have a living history, and they'll fly a World War II aircraft. You can go hear it, see it, touch it, feel it, you know, and just, you know, get that experience, get the smell of that, you know, that fuel.
As an aside too, the Chino Museum, Plains of Fame is gonna be moving to Santa Maria in the not too distant future,
Right,
so.
but they're not gonna be leaving that location. They're gonna keep that location there.
There's 2 airplanes.
Where is that?
It's in Chino, California. So like at the Chino airport. So if you get off on, if you take the 91, you transition to the 71 north and you get off on Euclid, you follow that all the way up to, I think it's Merrill Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's right over there. It's a beautiful museum. They got so many flying examples of World War II history. There's a lot of history there to be, you know, for a matter of fact. So it's a wonderful place to go look if you guys are interested in that kind of stuff. And the Thunderbirds from Edwards Air Force Base. Wow. This is their, I believe, this is, I forgot the name of the The Calypso, not the Calypso, maybe Calypso.
The awesomeness.
But, yeah, they're.
Your timing.
I don't know.
That's the nickname for it, when they get goose, when Maverick gets.
Yeah, yeah. But, they perform this maneuver at every show. Now, the ideal photo for this is to actually have this tail right lining up with that. But, just depending on, how high they're flying or whatever it is that they're doing that day, but still a wonderful composition. It just shows you, the different profiles upside down, right side up of the F-16.
Are they kind of banked like this? Cause the photo is like you're in the air with them and like you're shooting from a different plane or something.
I get a lot of that. I get a lot of, are you in the air with them? No, I'm not in the air with them. It's all from the ground.
Yeah.
There are some shots where I, if I can, I'll go out and take my ladder. I have a ladder that I get up and so I can look over the fence. But, generally, these are all from the ground and, yeah, these, it's like I said, it just depends on where you're positioned and what you're looking for. You don't necessarily have to be, 7 feet tall or, however tall you are, man. But, you could be, you can get those same shots. So it's just, it's more along the eye of the photographer and, not where you are, how tall you are or whatever it is. And then here's from the March Air Force Base Air Show. This is from the Southern California Air Show a couple of years ago. This is one of the F-16s that was that came in to be I think this one. Okay, there was two of them. This one was one of the static. The one that had the blue with the duck on it was going to be performing in the air show. That one didn't perform. But yeah, this is they brought these in. This is why I'm going to be going there on Thursday because I'm gonna be outside of the base, so I'm not gonna be on it, and this is that's the arrival day. That's when things like this are gonna come in, so you can get shots like this outside of the base coming right over. It just depends on where, this one actually depends on where you're at, because when they break right over the museum, and it's kind of like a straight up shot, you're not really gonna get anything. But yeah, this is, them coming over, kind of, observing and doing, the F-16s always like to do low approaches because they're trying to burn off whatever fuel they have so they can land safe.
What time of day?
And this one's gonna be, pretty much all day. So you're gonna see all sorts of aircraft coming in. I believe probably from 9 o'clock in the morning all the way till maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon.
And on the March Air Force, on the museum side, or are they gonna go to the other side?
They're gonna go to the other side. They're not gonna go to the museum, but this is from the museum side, but all the way down at the end of the runway. So there's a Nandina and Patterson. It's a little 90-degree street there, and that's where we usually kind of just hang out and just watch and wait for these things to come
And
in.
you start hanging out at what time?
I'm gonna probably be there about 9 o'clock. I have what they call FOMO, fear of missing out. So, I don't want to miss anything because I'm such an aviation geek. I love airplanes.
Awesome.
Just ask her.
And beach umbrella.
And then here's just another shot of the legacy flight. This is a different position that the aircraft were in. They were in a banking maneuver here. So you can actually see what I'm talking about. You're still going to get a little bit of blur in the image. Now it just happens to be steady. Just the way it was panning just didn't work out the way I wanted it to, but still a good image. Good image to keep. And it gives you a little bit of the top side too of the F-18. So you get to see the special paint job that they have on there that they put along, for a lot of their CAG birds, Commander of the Air.
Shows the size difference really well.
Yes,
because the F-14's flying on the Bearcat.
Yeah. So anytime, he made a good point. Anytime you watch these flights, you see these guys here, they're looking at him because he's the flight lead. So he's the one who's they're actually basing their speed off of him. And so therefore you're not going to get any closer or anything like that. And they're probably, I would say maybe about 25, 30 feet apart.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you can totally see the size difference and where we were from World War II, Korean War era to where we're at now. And then this one here is a pretty cool image. This one was taken at the Huntington Beach Air Show about 4 or 5 years ago. This was the Albatross flying and I edited it a certain way. I did a little bit of, my own interpretation of it, but I actually added like sun rays in the back. This one here is, it gives you that scene of an aircraft, a search and rescue aircraft flying high in the clouds, with the sun going down, maybe looking for that last chance to spot that splashdown fighter pilot, in the water, or somebody who needs to be rescued, kind of just, that's, basically what those things are for.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Excuse me, was it Patterson and Nadina?
Patterson and Nadina, yes.
Man, I got it.
Amazing. A quick question for you. What drew you into photography? What made you want to start capturing these? I know you love planes, but what got you to start shooting?
So, I used to go to these air shows, and I know a lot about the airplanes and stuff, and I was like, I would really, I saw some of these photos and I was like, I could do that, right? And, a friend of mine, he takes some really, 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 really good photos. He posts them, on his Instagram page and on Facebook, and he's also too, like, the main photographer for Planes of Fame. And, so he kind of inspired me, even though he really doesn't know it. But I've been told him. But, he kind of inspired me, and then, my best friend went out and bought a camera. And so I was like, hey, can I borrow your camera? I was like, well, I'm gonna go to these air shows. I'm gonna take some really good pictures. I'm gonna really show these guys, you don't need to be the best, whatever, right? I was like, go through my images and it's like, it's trash, It's just like delete. I'm like, what am I doing, So then, like, I got into it and I started looking at, like, what kind of settings would best be for me, and all that sort of stuff. And then there's like, there's the automatic mode on Canons where you can go and it'll automatically set up the lighting for you and everything, then you just snap the picture and you get what you get, but then you can edit it and whatever. And I was like, what? I'm not getting the prop blur that I want. So I was like delving into manual. So I shoot strictly on manual. So I'm always in constant control of my shutter speed, my f-stop, and my ISO. And so from there, I'm always constantly, just going back and forth. And there's been a few times where I got caught, just not paying attention. And, a fighter jet would come in and I'm set down to like 180th here. I'm blurry images, right? So, I am, pretty experienced in what I do, but I also too, I'm a novice a lot of times when it comes to, being aware of certain things. Photography, even though no matter how good you are, you're always learning something new. Every day, every time you go out, you photograph something, there's always something that you didn't know before. And so, I always try to pick a little bit of off, my friends, and I try to add that to my repertoire. And I go with, what they, kind of showed me and I've showed them. We're constantly talking with each other about, what we're doing, and it just breeds, better out of everybody. And we're not in competition with one another. We're just trying to make each other better, because when you're more successful as a group, you're gonna get recognized a little bit more.
Community over competition.
Yes.
Thank you.
A comment. I started doing this aerial photography a few years ago, and I submitted some of them for competition, and the judge says, oh, well, it's a nice shot, but the propeller, I like to see a full propeller ring on my planes. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, if I could hire a chase plane and fly along with them. Well, about a week ago, I saw an ad on the internet